More than 48 hours of counting votes, and some of the results from Tuesday's midterm elections are still not settled.
That's right. As of today, Democrats have a net gain of 29 seats in the House, and now both parties are duking it out in Arizona and Florida to make some final gains. Ed O'Keefe is tracking these races from Capitol Hill. Ed, so explain for our viewers, these midterms are still far from over. In Florida, both the governor's and Senate races may be heading to a recount. Explain why that is and walk us through what this recount could look like.
Basically, only tens of thousands of votes separate the two candidates in both of those races, Vlad. And so Florida law essentially allows for recounts to happen once you get under 1%. And in this case, you're in some cases just tenths of a percentage point separated from each other. So both sides yesterday, the Senate and the governor's races, essentially were plunged into potential recounts. The Republicans are crying foul, saying that in Broward County, Florida, and if you were alive and awake during the 2000 recount in Florida, you remember Broward County, may have somehow messed up its count, misplaced some ballots, and took a little too long in reporting others. And so Republicans are saying, what's going on there? And what did you potentially do to suddenly make things get even closer than they were on election night? So we will see here by essentially midday Saturday what counties in Florida report that then allow state officials to decide whether or not a recount and what kind of a recount will happen. But until then, we're going to see both sides trading accusations of either trying to put a thumb on the scale or not respecting the results and allowing them to totally be counted up.
So in the meantime, the president is chiming in. He tweeted this morning that law enforcement is looking into another big corruption scandal having to do with election fraud in Broward and Palm Beach. Florida voted for Rick Scott. And then there was a series of tweets from the Republican Senator Marco Rubio, and he writes, now Democrat lawyers are descending on #Florida. They have been very clear they aren't here to make sure votes are counted or every vote is counted. They are here to change the results of the election. Broward is where they plan to do it. Should voters in Broward County be concerned about the validity of this election and whether or not their votes are actually counting?
Well, you know, it's funny. I think if you were to ask people who follow politics in Florida and specifically Broward County, they tell you that just about every election there are questions about how results are being tabulated. They're considered one of the worst boards of elections in the country because they continue to have issues like this. Either ballots go misplaced, it takes too long to count them. There are questions about how ballots are being transported and handled. So sure, there are concerns. Does it rise to presidential level tweeting? Not necessarily. This will get sorted out. But Florida and that Senate race especially is an obsession of this White House, who wants to see the Republican Party hold on to as many positions of power down there as possible. And of course, Trump is quite invested in that Senate race, given that he was among those that was pushing the outgoing Governor Rick Scott to run for the seat and try to pick it up for the GOP. So again, as goes everything in Florida, it'll be dramatic and drawn out, and we'll see probably by early next week what exactly officials there decide to do. But for now, both the Senate and governor's races and the results of them remain in doubt until state officials determine what to do.
So let's talk just a little bit about that governor's race, which is, as you pointed out, also perhaps headed to a recount. What can you tell us about that?
Well, there again, Andrew Gillum, the Democrat, trails by about 36,000 or so votes behind Republican Andrew Gillum. And while he had conceded somewhat graciously and quickly on Tuesday night, yesterday his campaign essentially pulled that back, saying, oh, you know, it turns out there may be some more ballots here, and we're going to wait and see how it flushes out. Again, ultimately, as was the case, remember, back in 2000, the Republican may win. The question is by how much. And if you get below certain percentages in Florida, you either have a recount and you may have to have a statewide manual recount. And that can just take a little while. And again, it may ultimately result in the Republicans holding on. But if you're the guy that's trailing and you're seeing the numbers closing in, why wouldn't you wait and see? And I think that's what we're seeing here now.
So it's not just about Florida. This election hasn't ended.
It never is just about Florida, Anne-Marie.
No.
That's right. There are 49 other states. We spent a lot of time on Florida.
The election is not over in Arizona either. There is a Senate race there that is undecided, with more than 300,000 ballots yet to be counted, as of last night at least. So where does the race stand, and how much longer until we finally know what the results are?
Well, we got a lead flip in Arizona, and a big one. The Democrat Kyrsten Sinema pulled ahead by a few thousand votes, and it's expected that that lead will increase later today as ballots continue to be counted. The issue there is that you have people who vote in person on Election Day, you have people who mail in their ballot in advance, and then you have people who drop off their absentee ballot in person, either at a polling site or in a mailbox on Election Day. And the system essentially has to wait for all of those to arrive. And it was believed that almost 20% of the ballots were essentially day of absentee ballots, or they were put into the system, delivered into the system on Election Day, but were in an envelope. And so that's what's still being counted. Democrats and Republicans in different ways believe they're ultimately going to prevail. But Sinema pulling ahead suggests that there may not be enough of a vote there for her to hold on. If she wins, she becomes the first Democrat to win a Senate seat in Arizona since 1988, so an even bigger deal for Democrats to not only win in this state, but to take back something they haven't had in 30 years. And either way, no matter who wins in Arizona, history will be made, of course, because Arizona has never elected a woman to the U.S. Senate.
All right, Ed O'Keefe, I know you're keeping track of all of this stuff for us. Thank you so much.